What's up, people? Welcome to this episode of the By the Hood podcast or webcast because I don't know how you're consuming this content. I'm your host, as always. My name is Jimmy. And as we start off every show, that's with gratitude. Just want to say thank you to anyone and everyone who supports all the various projects we have going on at By the Hood. Special shout out to all the students from By the Hood University as well as the youth from our By the Hood ownership camp. My partner Crown Core is not here today, but we have a excellent episode, and our platform is designed to highlight brothers and sisters who are doing positive work in the community, putting out great energy. This brother that we have with us, I can't wait to get into this conversation because he's in a space that I really don't know too much about, but it affects every one of us, right? And that's city development and planning, man. So without further ado, I want to bring our special guest on, man. We have Jac Marcelus. Jac, how are you, good brother?
I'm doing great, my brother. Good morning.
Yeah, man. Thank you, man. I'm looking forward to this conversation because, I talked to you on the phone the other day and we were talking about a couple of things and you were breaking things down. And I'm like, whoa, like, city planning and development is like a whole different thing. I don't really, have any experience in that, but it affects every one of us, man. But before we get into the specifics of that, let's talk a little bit about you. So where were you born and raised? Where are you from?
I'm originally from Miami, Florida, born and raised.
Okay. So coming up in Miami, Florida, what kind of student were you?
You know what? I think I was pretty much, you know, in a sense of like articulate. I'll probably say very crafty in a sense of bright ideas. But I think growing up, I was a pretty good student. I did have all honors, AP classes, played sports, track, football,
Uh-huh.
things like that. But of course, you know, things didn't go the way that I wanted to go. But I mean, I graduated from Florida Atlantic University. I got my degree in urban and regional planning, and right now still trying to complete my master's at Drexel whenever I can get back into it
Yeah.
for structural engineering.
Man, that's dope. Shout to Drexel. That's where my master's is from. But with that being said, let me ask you this question. So your undergrad was actually in planning.
Yeah.
Is that what you wanted to do when you started college? Like, what was the plan? Like, what made you major in that? Like, how'd that come about?
Oh man, it's an extremely long story. I think I was pretty much like not to sound arrogant, but there were like so many things that I was like good at, but I really just wanted to do more like investment banking. I thought eventually I would, get into that, learn a couple languages based on the magnet school that I was going to down in South Florida. But of course, I wanted to play sports. From there, I shifted into thinking I'll probably be able to get into Oxford at the time, trade over there. But that didn't, of course, life takes its course. And I was going through college. I switched majors so many times because either it didn't. I felt like it was something that it just came too easy for me, whether it was like economics, business, or things like that.
Mhm.
So I was
So
talking
where'd you start? When you first started, what was your first major? What is the first thing you said you wanted to get into?
it was, I think it was called, damn, what was it? I want to say something that dealt with like, it was a double major. It was economics and financial, I think financial analysis.
Okay, something in the finance space.
Yeah, something in the finance space.
Okay, so you ended up switching majors a couple of times, and that's how you ended up with planning. So what was it about planning that intrigued you to make you, actually even choose that?
Actually, what got me there, I was talking to a good friend, and they asked me, "Yo, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to do this, and the third." But it always involved building. And it was like, well, that sounds like a planner. And I was like, planner? I was like, what's that? I didn't even know what it was at the time. And then I looked into it, and then I was like, yeah, this sounds like a component of everything that I want to do, because it wasn't just about real estate. It was, being able to see things from a different set of lens, and being able to have foresight. So I dug deep, did a lot of research, and from there I went, you know, got my degree in planning. And went,
Okay. All right, so let me ask you this question, right? Because, well, first off, I want to say one thing too. Right? I changed my majors several times in undergrad too. So, to any of the youth watching this or listening to this, maybe you should like take your time before you declare your major because I ended up with a degree in business management, and the only reason I did that is because after I switched my major so many times, that was the degree that most of my credits transferred to. But yeah, so switching majors is kind of wild. But with that, all that being said, so you get into planning, right? And can you kind of explain to our audience exactly like what a planner does, or like urban developer, like what does that actually encompass? What does it mean to be a planner?
Um, it's able to take what the vision of the city wants to look like in the next, 10, 20 plus years. It's being able to look at all facets from community and economic redevelopment, whether it's housing, transportation development, even environmental planning, and these are all the multidisciplinaries of that industry that is kind of like people don't realize. It's zoning. It's basically say how the makeup of the city is going to look like, how it should be built, how it should be designed. There's rules. Same thing with with every city. How and there's just like comprehensive plan that most people don't pay attention to. For most people that don't know, the city updates it every 5 to 10 years, and
Hmm.
it's there. And literally, even when I first got to Philly, one of the very first things that I did was from an investor standpoint, I looked at what the city was trying to do in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And
Hmm.
believe it or not, when you dig into that, if you're like an investor, you can actually see what's coming to your neighborhood, or what capital infrastructures is being built around your potential future project, or you know if you decide to hold on to it and it appreciates in value. So you have a
Yeah.
question? I'm sorry.
No, no, I was just gonna say that's interesting because like I remember the 2035 plan here in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
in reading that, and I'm like, wow, like this is already planned. Like, in terms of what's going to happen in specific neighborhoods and areas. I'm like, they already have this already figured out and planned. And this is what I mean by how what your work actually affects all of us, but a lot of us don't recognize that there's someone seeing these things, being a visionary, so to speak, as we travel the city. And as an investor, how looking at some of these plans can actually, like you just mentioned, how it can help your business as an investor. And even if you're an agent, right, you can
Or
see
even if you're a business owner, like
absolutely.
just a regular business or a mom and pops.
Okay, so let me ask you this question in terms of like, so you're in the business of planning, and I know you've worked in multiple jurisdictions. What jurisdictions are, if you can mention, what
Mhm.
jurisdiction are you working in now? If you can mention that.
uh I'm actually Camden,
Okay.
Baltimore, and Philly. And of course, being that I'm from Florida, it's always going to be Florida at the same time. So, I'm always looking into these markets. At
Mhm.
one point, I was in 12 states.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was pretty active. I was pretty busy. Not from a development standpoint, but more like, like land development,
Yeah.
acquisition, as well as managing portfolios. So
Now,
I've done that for about like 10 years. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, and so what I was going to ask you about, right, is if someone is interested in this space, what kind of skill set, like what kind of skills do you need, or what kind of skill set should you have if you're looking to get into this space?
Patience. You have to be able to have patience. You have to be able to have a plan and stick to it, because if you're gonna, I mean, you should treat your business like a business model, and
Mhm.
you should set targets and goals and things like that. And I know that sounds redundant, but it's like economics 101 is business, and for the most part, um you know, properly learning how to plan around your projects and future projects is essential. And there's like so much beneficial things that we don't have access to. Well, actually, we do have the potential to have access to them, but we just don't know about them. Like, outside of just the opportunity zones, there's the CDBG money, there's the home money. I mean, grant. There's the low income house credit. A lot of people don't like to hear that, and they think Section 8, but that's not really what it is. It's for people that's spending more than 75% of their income just on housing, and being able to, find these opportunities to subsidize that. and there's subsidized dollars both on, you know, city, state, and on a federal level. And these are a lot of, you know, these are how our most affordable housing projects are structurally financed, and being able to understand how to access those untapped earning potentials and making it
Mhm.
work for
Man, that's information. That's This is interesting to me, right? As someone who's in the real estate space, just like understanding that, again, I mentioned this before, that someone is actually sitting around planning all these things.
you.
Um, so let me ask you this, right? So you talked about, you know, your journey as a young student, and then going into college, and then, you know, kind of you know, getting into this space.
Mhm.
Um, what would you say has been your biggest hurdle from where you started as a young athlete, student athlete, I should say, um, to now getting into, you know, city planning and development?
If I'm going to be honest with myself, I'm going to say discipline and being able to have a great group of people around you. And you know, being able to be around people that has the same vision as you. You know, when you don't align yourself with that, then
Hmm.
you don't have a plan, believe it or not. And I know I'm going to keep saying that. If you don't have a plan, then you know you tend to veer off the road. You know, and not being able to see those pitfalls along the way is can be problematic. So, for instance, you know, I'll take me as an example. I'm an extremely giving person, you know, so sometimes I think me being that way with some of the people that's, you know, in my circle, sometimes you have to change that circle in order to elevate, because you know people have different journeys and you have to be able to follow your journey, and you know, and don't veer from that. And one of the biggest thing for me is to believe in yourself. The minute you stop believing in yourself, then you know you hit all type of problems, you know. And you know, being able to have somebody that you can kind of like feed off of, whether it's a mentor, like that's growing up for me. I didn't have that. I didn't have a big brother. I didn't have a mentor. You know, you know, I have a father, but you know, he was always away, you know, because he did import export
Hmm.
business, you know. But for me, everything that I learned from planning, development, land acquisition, construction, you name it, every, you know, like structuring finance, like that's self-taught. Like
Hmm.
nobody taught me that. I had to learn that on my own. And I felt like I think I was always chasing my own self. Like I'm the only person that I'm competing with is myself.
Mm.
I'm not competing with anybody else. I'm competing with myself of the, you know, not for the lack of knowledge that I have, but for what I know. And because of what I know, sometimes it could be frustrating because, you know, it's almost as if like, hey, I should be here, and being able to try to have that patience, because
Yeah.
that's the biggest key right there. Whether you're doing something today, believe it or not, it's gonna be there 5, 6 years from now. And it's just being able to just get through those cycles in life and being able to get to that point, you
Yeah.
know.
I'm
So go ahead.
I'm sitting there taking notes. I like that. That's a bar right there. The only person I'm competing with is myself, right? To actually come into understanding that, it gives you a little perspective. But based on what you just said, what has helped you with the discipline? Because you talked about discipline being one of your biggest hurdles. Have you found something that helps you with that?
I would say that you know, there's there's several, but I think the biggest thing for me is faith. You
Faith.
know,
Okay.
yeah, faith. You know, I grew up in a Christian home, and you know, not, you know, people, you know, people have their different religions and things like that, and just being able to believe in something, you
Mm-hmm.
know, whoever it is, whoever your God is, or you know, whoever it is that you worship, you know. And for me, that's a foundation. And you know, once that foundation, you know, is solidified, then everything else will come to pass, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the minute you can be disciplined in that manner, then you know it will show through the fruits of your labor. So I think for me, faith is one of the biggest thing. And you know, being able to rally around family, I'm extremely big on family. You know, coveting the things that you desire the most. You know, most people, you know, they have their vices and things like that. For me, my vices are family, not, you know, in a good way and a bad way sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, being able to set those boundaries also, you know. And believe it or not, one of the things that, you know, being that we are in the industry, especially for a person of minority. Um, it's I don't want to use the word competitive,
Mm-hmm.
but it's what I've learned is we're playing a different game, you
Yeah.
know. And this game was not designed for us,
Yeah.
and it takes a toll. You have a lot of people that are successful, but at what cost?
Mm.
And I think, me not changing and trying to be the best version of myself, again, I'm competing with myself. So if I want to be better than who I was yesterday, then that's what I'm going after.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff right there, man. And faith is important. Let me ask you this question. Do you have a favorite book or anything that's inspired you along your journey?
You know, when I think about that, two things come to mind.
Okay.
One book, believe it or not, that was extremely impactful, and everybody heard the book of Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power.
Yes.
I read that back and forth a couple of times, and believe it or not, when I started to practice some of those basic principles, it got me to where I'm at today.
Hmm.
For the most part. And sometimes when I forget about that, I go back to some of those 48 laws of power.
Yeah.
And the second thing for me is the Bible.
Okay.
That's my weapon right there.
Mm-hmm. Understood. It's funny because obviously both classics. But the funny thing about the 48 laws is there's a version called the 50th law,
Yeah. My
co-written by 50. I actually like that better, but that's just me. Just because he gives stories. I mean, most of the laws are the same, but he gives stories from his own life that show how those laws apply, which I thought that was dope. But man, so this is good stuff here. So Jack, let me ask you this question. Well, first off, shout out to our brother Jabbar who connected us, and he wanted me to ask you a specific question. I'm gonna bring up.
This guy. Yeah.
Jabbar told me that you have about 25 pairs of Yeezys. He wants to know that
Oh my God. No.
he said so he wants to know that are you going to try to sell them now for a profit because they become collector's items with everything going on, or are you going to keep them?
Nah, man. Listen, they too comfortable for me to get rid of. Listen, at the end of the day, listen, he had a message, and I think he just missed it. That's it.
Yeah. I ain't even gonna ask you nothing about him. Let him do his.
Yeah.
I was just joking because the bar said, this guy got like 25 pairs of Yeezys. He's a Yeezy collector. I said, well, is he gonna make money off of them? So
Listen, I was getting my Yeezys before Yeezys was Yeezys. So
got you.
yeah.
All right. So let me ask you this, and they might be valuable now. You never know. You never have an asset in your hands. So what does the future look like for you, Jack? What are some of the things that you're looking to work on in the future? Right, you've established yourself in a space. You talked about your journey, but what does the future look like? What are some of the things that you want to work on?
Auger hoods, mixed use projects, like and I'm shooting. I'm going after like $1 billion projects. Building cities.
Building
You
city.
a lot of times people ask me, what is it that you do? And I don't like to use the word real estate investor. I don't like to use the term, developer, because it's so diluted. As I was telling you earlier, I consider myself, using my discipline between being a planner and understanding real estate and construction. I consider myself a concept developer. I'm really big on housing and community development, and I understand how important that is for everyone. And real estate is one of the biggest asset class. But you know, um, I've worked with on other projects, not my projects per se, but they were like $100 million projects.
Mhm.
And being a planner on that. Worked for the city of Pembroke Pines, North Bay Village, where I started off as a zoning clerk. And being able to have foresight, like even when I first got here 12 years ago, before Point Breeze was Point Breeze, I saw it,
Mhm.
all the potential, like, coming from Miami, where homes are like $250,000 with like real estate tax and things like that, picking up something for like $5,000, $500, like that was butter. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not what it is today, but
Absolutely not.
you know, For me, yes, I have a trajectory. I have my outline. I have my 5 to 10 year forecast, and hopefully in 10 years, I'm building cities.
Yeah,
Rebuilding them. I'm reimaging them. I'm redesigning them. I'm basically redefining it. So
yeah. So I got a couple questions based upon what you just said, right? You talked about, your experience in zoning. What did you learn from your experience working in zoning about like, real estate investing and development and all those kind of things? What does zoning teach you?
learn how to work with the city. You
Okay.
know, or being able to work around, being able to just have that partnership. I've sat, like, true story. I'm not going to say which city, but I've sat in a zoning meeting, um, where a developer at the time, wanted to get something passed, and there were some changes that he needed to make. And I kid you not, they knew what his holding costs and entitlements were costing him, and just because of who that developer was, they
Oh,
held him for like 6 months.
oh, that's nasty. That's politics, though. Politics plays
It
in everything
is.
you do.
It is. So it's just being able to learn how to play the political game, in a sense of, like, where you're not so much of, giving so much into it, but being able, it's a working relationship.
Yeah.
When you decide to enter to, like, a bigger arena,
Mm-hmm.
because still, it goes back to that comprehensive plan. This is what we want our city to look like.
Yeah.
This is what we want to get built. You're either going to make a zoning change, or you're going to make these changes that's going to fit our model for the future.
Yeah. And I only got a couple more questions for you. One of them is you talked about the idea of building cities. And it's interesting because I hear a lot of people talking about that now, whether it's the Akon thing, or even we just talked
Uh,
about even Kanye recently talking about he wants to build a city. Um and I've heard other people say it as well. And I'm like, that sounds like a whole lot, the way people just throw that around in terms of like building a city. But then on the other hand, um
that takes a body of work.
it does. It does. I've seen cities. I've seen actual cities for sale. Because a lot of times when we think of cities, we're thinking of the big city, not understanding that there's also small. You
Yeah,
know. You know. So cities come in various sizes. Is the point I'm making. But that
correct.
takes a whole hell of a lot. And what do you think about this whole idea that people now are like, I want to just build a city? The way people talk about it as if it's not a lot of work. Like when you see those kind of things, what do you say as someone who's actually in that space?
It's a lot of work. Reason being is because you it's not just about taking a piece of dirt and
Mhm.
making it something. It's about thinking, how is it going to impact it from an environmental standpoint, from a transportation standpoint, from a housing and community development standpoint. Again, I am throwing out all of the discipline. There's 5 discipline in planning
Okay.
from a governmental, standpoint,
Yeah.
and these things you have to, like, bring all of this together, and you have to do, like, what we call, like, a SWOT analysis: strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Hmm.
And you don't want to develop something that's going to threaten the environment, let
What
alone
are those,
threaten.
what are those 5 disciplines for someone who has no idea? What are those 5 disciplines?
So planning is broken down into sectors.
Okay.
If you decide to be an urban planner,
Hmm.
um I focus more on community and economic redevelopment.
Okay.
That's pretty much, like, how, and then there's housing. So you have housing, community and economic redevelopment. There's environmental. There's, if you're, like, working for the government,
Hmm.
and there's TOD. There's TOD planning, which is, TOD is, trans-oriented development.
Okay.
So that deals with whether it's airport, whether it's,
Like
like,
transportation.
transportation,
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
air, sea, like, that's believe it or not, planners are involved, then the engineers, and everybody
Yeah,
else.
that is a lot of work because all 5 of those probably have specialists in each individual piece, right?
Exactly. So
And yeah,
you pick a path that you want to go down to.
gotcha.
So for me wanting to do structural engineering as a master is for me to be able to go do, like, roadways and bridges and things like that, and focus on TOD development, because you got to think about it. When you have like a dense city, you
Mm-hmm.
want to kind of like start. For me, I want to start focusing on having to travel less, not having to spend 20 minutes just to go 1 mile down the street,
Yeah. Yeah.
or to wait another 5 to 10 minutes to get on a bus that's going to take me a half an hour to get around the corner. I mean, and especially if it's like an old city, like for example, Philly's an old city because it's like one of the founding states aside from Delaware. They didn't anticipate this type of growth. They didn't anticipate this type of density of people, so it's hard to kind of like try to expand the freeway, to help with traffic,
Yeah.
because it's already congested in the sense of like you know it's obstructed and things like that.
That's interesting because looking at the infrastructure we have now across the country, like I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that this wasn't always here, right?
Exactly.
You look back at historical photos or watching sort of documentaries, you're like, man, that was a dirt road. Like this was built over a long period of time. And as many complaints as we have about our infrastructure, we have an infrastructure. And if you traveled and been to other countries, you appreciate what we do have here. All right. So my very last question before we get out of here is one of the things that I see as a big talking point in terms of what's going on in terms of real estate development, economic development, is how to combat homelessness. And people believe that because of what's going on in the economy, it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
Yeah.
As someone who kind of works in that space, what are some of the things you're thinking about, or some of the ideas you may have that could kind of like help with that, if that's something you're thinking about?
Reusing things that are already there. For example, shipping containers. We have an influx of shipping containers that we can, if they have certain zoning codes for it, we can. I mean, they're practicing it in other states.
Yeah.
But if, say for example, a city like Philly, because cost of lumber, inflation, and things like that, everything is costing money now. And being able to use the items and things that we currently have right now and repurpose them. So shipping container is a good one, because it doesn't cost nothing. In regards to obtaining it, you just need a plot of land, and then you just put it there, of course, and you have your utilities, and then I think it's just going to go to a point to like tiny homes. Being able.
Not to cut you off, I apologize, but what's interesting is the city just approved like their first. I just saw this past week. It's funny. It's just this past week. This little park, they're going to try that to have like they zoning approved like a tiny home, like a little tiny home park. To try to help exactly what you're saying. But I think that's an excellent idea in terms of reusing what's already there.
Yeah,
so what is something that's that you've been thinking about?
I think the tiny homes is more of to help with. There's not enough housing for everyone.
Yeah.
Of course, people are getting priced out of which is considered affordability. And I think that's just really what it comes down to. I think people want a quality of living. They don't want to be able to just go to a roach infested house or a property that's not well taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's where the city have to put these people and things like that. Inadequate living. I'm all about quality of living, so.
Yeah, so that's important. The funny thing is I read a study, and it was from some institution out in the West Coast, though. But they were talking, and it's not Northwest where they actually have tiny homes and container homes, and they were saying that, that was supposed to be the use, but it became like almost like a toy for the wealthy, where it pushed the prices up so much because most of the tiny homes and container homes were being purchased by wealthy folks, and they pushed the value up so much.
Yep.
It kind of didn't help the people it was meant to help. And they were trying to figure out how to combat that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
We'll take government intervention is the only way to do that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take the government, but it's unfortunate that I'm going to have to say this, but it's almost as if like you need poor people in order for the economy to thrive, because big business, wealthy people, that's how they become wealthy. They feed on poor people.
No.
And, not just when I say poor people, I'm talking about people that's not making a combined income of $250,000 a year.
Yeah, you're the working class, right? So that's how this current system is set up. And unless we move to a different system, it's what it's going to be. There's always going to be different classes. I mean, unfortunately, but but there's ways to kind of like, work with that too. But that's a whole other long conversation.
I want to add something, and I know we're extending it,
No,
but
go ahead, sure.
it goes back to a question that you asked me: how do I keep all of this together and be able to like push through? And is it a lot? Yes. Is it a lot? It's a lot. And something that I'll share is, the biggest thing is mental health. So for me, especially for people of color, people don't much like, especially for a man. Me, I've been in therapy for like 2 years, but it's not because I have social or psychotic issues. It's just more of, being able to like have a checks and balance, because I
Mhm.
do have a personal life, I do have a business life, and I'm also thinking about other things down the road, and being able to keep that together, and being able to like not get bad advice by, how we tried to go to our friends and family and speak to them about certain things, and sometimes those response or could be, I would say, conflicted in a way. So I like
Yeah.
to have a non-biased opinion about things, and I have an amazing therapist. We talk about everything
How
from
has
family.
therapy how has therapy changed or helped you?
Dramatically, a lot. It's definitely for me, like, it's not just mental, it's also physical, because I also like work out. So
Hmm.
between those two things, that for those create a sense of foundation for me, and keeping things together. When you're out there, you got to take care of your body,
Hmm.
got to take care of your health, and you also got to take care of your mental health. And for me, I'm taking care of my spiritual health. So those three things is my trifecta. But therapy has helped me a lot. They help me to realize, people that I undervalue, or people that I do value or overvalue, being able to create boundaries. And that was one of the biggest things, that I battled with, because I didn't have boundaries, not just with family, but also with business, and friends. And being able to push back, it started to, I felt like I started to get my power back, you
Mm.
know. So, being able to, but you also got to do the work, and I've done the work. And there's just things that, we have to live with the decisions that we make in life. And I've always been like that, even before therapy. But with therapy now, it allows me to now think about things, and I'll take a step back, breathe, or I'll let it come back to me, and I just go with it.
Man, that's great. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad you brought that up. We just had our brother Doug on our podcast a couple weeks ago from Black Men Hill, and that was a great conversation about mental health and how important it is for us to like have our spaces, right? Especially as
Mhm.
Black men, where we can
Yeah.
just have conversations, man. So thank you for sharing that, Jack. Jack, man, this has been an excellent talk. I just want to say first and foremost, thank you for sharing your time. Time is the most valuable asset, so you are appreciated, and thank you so much for sharing your time with your audience, and also sharing your story and teaching us a little bit about planning and development. I think that we all can get something from this, and to understand that all these things are thought out, and they're visionaries that actually sit back and try to figure out how to make us have productive lives. So thank you so much, Jack. I just want to say we appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And hey, listen to our audience out there. I know this is going to be hard to believe what I'm getting ready to say, but Jack is not on social media, right? You told me that it's like the craziest thing. Jack
I'm working on it.
working on it, but Jack is so focused on work.
I'm focused, man. I'm focused.
Yeah, he's so focused that he's like, look, I ain't even got time for that, right?
Listen, I don't even have Facebook.
He don't even have a Facebook, no IG, no nothing. Are
Listen,
you even? Are you hold up? Are you even on LinkedIn, which is the business?
nah.
Listen, Jack is all about his business, man.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I'm a creator. I like to be behind the scenes. I like to create. I
understood.
like to be in the space of like,
No, understood, man.
but now I am, I've been talking to my team, and I think it's about that time. So
Okay, so
we're
once
shooting
Jack
for next
drops
year.
his social, when he drops his social, I'll make sure to go back to this episode and put it in there so you all can follow Jack once he drops his social. But until then, I just want you guys to make sure you share this episode, get Jack's story out there. And I just want to say again, Jack, man, listen, we like highlighting brothers and sisters who are doing great work, and you're doing great work in a space that I don't see too many of us in. So continue success. And just want to say again, thank you, brother. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks a
All
lot.
right. And to the audience out there, as we always say, it's not about how much money you make, it's about how much you keep. Game elevates. We'll see you guys in our next episode. Thank you so much. We appreciate y'all. Peace.